And we are live. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Hack Smarter Live. My name is Tyler Ramsbey. I want to say a special welcome to all of you on LinkedIn, Twitch, and YouTube. We are streaming across all of the platforms. And today's stream is, I have a special treat for me and for really all of us. I am here with the Tory Fisher, Director of Operations at Rhino Security Labs. Tory, welcome to the live stream.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. And for those of you in chat, I'm doing my best to monitor all three platforms. If anything sounds off, I don't have a good way to monitor the audio as I'm talking. I am the one-man production everything. So if anything sounds off on any of the platforms, please let me know in the chat and I will do my best to get it fixed for you guys. But based on everything I can see, I think everything is good as of now. So with that being said, Tory, let's just dive into things. Now, we've of course met before. We work together every single day. But if we had never met, you only had a few minutes to introduce yourself. So that classic elevator question, who is Tory Fisher?
Yeah, bold question to start with, but a really good one. So you started off perfect. My name is Tory Fisher. I'm the Director of Operations at Rhino Security Labs, and I'm also the Pentest Project Manager. So that means I'm involved in quite a bit of the day-to-day operations of Rhino, keeping things running smooth, but then also I'm involved in every single engagement that Rhino performs.
That is awesome. And so when you say director of operations, when people think of pen testing companies, the main thing they think of is just the pen tester itself. And just for clarity, I know we have probably a wide audience watching this from different backgrounds. When it comes to pen testing, there's really two big categories. And Tory, correct me if I'm explaining this wrong, but you have internal pen testing, which is when a pen tester works at a single company and they pen test internal web apps. What Rhino is we do consultancy, which means we are hired by different external clients. So we're working with different clients really around the United States, sometimes international, doing pen tests. So I just want to be very clear as we have this conversation, we are talking about the consultancy side of pen testing. Now, that being said, for context, when people hear pen testing, they think about what I do, like the hands-on pen testing. They don't realize there's really a lot more to pen testing than just that. So you said you are the director of operations. Do you mind just filling us in, what does that
Yeah.
actually mean on a day-to-day basis? What does that role look like?
Absolutely. Well, if I'm doing a very good job, nobody needs to know a whole bunch of what goes around in the background because what I do is I set up the organization for success. So what I mean by that is I want to make sure that the pen testers, you can go in and hack all day long without any problems, hiccups, or having to worry about anything. And I also need to make sure that the organization itself is running smoothly. What I mean by that is I'm involved in everything from HR to invoicing to managing the projects, dealing with clients, and sometimes even a little bit of sales. But my main goal really is two. So I consider that we have two different types of clients. We have the pen testers, which I consider a client, and then we have our actual clients. And my goal is to make sure that both sides are absolutely satisfied, remove any blockers, make sure that everybody can get what they're hoping for out of their day.
I love it. And I think I can say personally, really appreciate it. You really do an awesome job on that and allow people like me to focus on what I think is the fun stuff, which is the hands-on keyboard pen testing type things. Yeah. Hey, before we keep going, I do want to say for those of you watching live, I do want to do my best to prioritize your questions. So as we go through this, I have a bunch of my own questions that we can run through. But if you're watching live and you have a question for Tory about pen testing or getting into pen testing or project management, please drop the question. Like I said before, I'm doing my best to monitor all three chat platforms. So if I don't see your question right away, I promise you I will eventually see it. If I ignore it, just spam it and say it again and we'll come back to it. So hey, those watching live, feel free to ask your questions. But Tory, I'm curious about how you ended up in the field of pen testing as a director of operations. Some of it's technical, but a lot of it is working with clients, sales, like you talked about, leadership type things. So how did you end up in this very niche field of pen testing of all things?
Yeah, kind of organically, actually, and almost by accident. So, backing up, before I was at Rhino, I was working at a consulting firm called the Family Business Consulting Group. And what they do is they help families transition their family businesses from generation to generation at a very high level. So, when I started there, I had several different titles. One of them was IT manager, and I had no idea what that was, what that meant, but I did partner very heavily with an MSP. And when I came in, being very green and literally not knowing anything, I wanted to know, well, what does this job actually mean? What am I supposed to be managing? What am I supposed to be learning? And long story short, over the course of 7 years, I had a really fantastic partnership with an MSP that taught me quite a bit of the basics, where I was eventually able to change every single system in that organization as something that was cloud-based, got rid of the on-site server, and I learned so much in the process. I developed and implemented a CRM, did a whole bunch of internal training, and from that, I really got excited about security. And I did some security training as well. Prior to coming to Rhino. So teaching people the basics, folks who traveled a lot, actually, the importance of a VPN, the importance of making sure you know what Wi-Fi network you're connecting to, and, of course, phishing basics and how to look out for those sort of things. So that was my first introduction to it. And when I moved to Seattle, I started looking for a new position, and it just sort of was happenstance that I heard from a recruiter of Rhino, and I had never, ever heard of pen testing. And I thought it was the absolute coolest thing I had ever heard of. I mean, everyone's seen Hackers as a kid. That's always been one of my favorite movies of all times, but I didn't know that that was actually a job. And so with my background in operations and the limited knowledge that I do have in technology, I knew that this was a space that I was really excited to get into. So when the opportunity opened up, I absolutely jumped on it. And it has been wonderful, almost 4 years. Saturday and Sunday is my 4-year anniversary, and I've not looked back. It's great.
And we just happen to line up this interview at that 4-year anniversary, so that's awesome. That's
go.
Cool timing. I have a rather strange question. Those watching who don't know you are going to think this is a very strange question, but I'm curious on my own side, because we talked about this a little bit before the interview. One of the crazy things you used to do is skydiving, and like competition skydiving. Before we even talk about how that relates to pen testing, I'm just curious, how do you even get into competition skydiving? That's almost more strange than pen testing from my perspective. Like, tell us a little bit about skydiving.
It's very related, actually. Curiosity. I mean, pen testers are always curious, and I'm a very curious individual myself. And literally my 18th birthday, I was like, I've never been in an airplane before. I've never been to an airport. Why don't I jump out of a plane and see what's going on? So I did a tandem skydive, landed, and said, oh my gosh, I need to learn how to do this. And, being 18, barely out of high school, still trying to figure out life, I didn't really know what next steps were. So I actually emailed one of the owners of the Skydive Chicago, shout out to you guys, saying, I want to learn how to do this. I don't know how. I'm going to just start coming in and working for you in your manifest office. And I was working there and living there over the summers for several years. And it was a very good experience. I'm completely retired right now, but I've found it, and I know you're going to lead into this question about how it relates to pen testing. It's all about risk and evaluating and always looking at different priorities and pivoting, because, with the skydiving, you have a very finite amount of time to do a certain action that you're trying to do. And there's a lot of hiccups along the way. And sometimes you have to really think on your feet and get very creative.
That's neat. And what I love about the way you apply that to pen testing is something I think many people need to get the skill of doing, is taking past experience and applying it to a role. So when it comes to pen testing, whether it's a project manager, director of operations, an actual pen tester, I think the hang up a lot of people have is they look at their past experience and they say, well, I haven't been in a highly technical field, or I haven't even heard of pen testing before. How am I going to break into the field? So do you mind just sharing a little bit about how some of your past experience, not related to pen testing at all, has translated well to where you're currently at? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's really just about being flexible and asking questions and not being afraid to speak up. Because actually, going back to Skydive Chicago, if I didn't ask, I wouldn't have received. And it's a lot of just trying to find unique ways of doing what you want to do. And yeah, there's really no good answer to that, but just being creative.
Yeah. That's so good. And when it comes to Rhino, especially in a leadership role, I think you know this as well as I do. When it comes to tech and tech leadership in general, a lot of people hop around to different companies. You see this in startups often. You see this in bigger firms as well. People are at a place for 6 months to a year. They switch jobs. You've been at Rhino, you just said, for like almost 4 years, over 4 years pretty soon. So we're like over 4 years. Why are you still at Rhino? Like what motivates you to continue doing what you're doing?
I really like working with Rhino for a number of reasons. So our CEO, Benjamin Caudell, has been a fantastic mentor to me. Even before I was hired, during the interview process with him, we did some moonlighting and he did a little bit of training with me. And we really got a good sense of working one-on-one. And I really love having that direct access, that direct knowledge. We're constantly talking about leadership issues, and I'm always growing, and I can ask any question and always get an answer. But what really makes me happy at Rhino too is, working for the pen testers. Like I said, I kind of view them as a client. I want them to be enabled to do whatever it is that makes them happy and produce the really great work. So whether it's supporting their educational goals, their research, if they're writing a blog, training, some guidance, coaching on soft skills, or just simply being the project manager and making sure the trains are running on time. That brings me so much joy. And it's really the industry too. Hackers are in apologize if the term hacker is offensive to anyone. Pen testers, I feel, are a really special group of people just because they sometimes get into a little bit of trouble. They've got a sense of humor generally, and they're always looking to break things. And, honestly, if I had known that breaking things was a career in my much younger days, I would have found this path much sooner. But it really is a true joy. And then also working with clients as well, they get a lot of satisfaction and value out of the work that we produce. And that makes me so happy as well. I really enjoy supporting other people's goals, and security is huge. And if our clients don't have confidence in their systems or pen testing, that's not great. And it's such a key thing. We're always hearing about ransomware attacks and all sorts of things in the news. And I really want people to be safe, got to mitigate that risk and make sure that everybody is satisfied.
So cool. And plus, you get to do live streams like this. So you say you support pen testers. You even
Yes.
go on live streams with pen testers and talk about the field. So thank you for that. And
Yeah,
thank you for sharing
of
all that
course.
information. Once again, parts of pen testing I don't think most people are aware of. We hear pen testing, we think of hands on keyboard, terminal, like who am I root. Like that's what we think of. We don't think about all the details that go with pen testing to make it possible to actually help organizations before the bad guys essentially get to the organization, so we can be there first and find
Mm-hmm.
those things and help them remediate and patch some of that stuff. One of the other challenges when it comes with leadership, once again, you likely know this way better than I do, all fields in tech, but leadership in particular, I think are susceptible to burnout. There's always more learning. There's always more to do. There's always more growth that you want. You're never satisfied with where you are, because if you were, you wouldn't be in a leadership role. So how do you balance like all of that with your own mental, emotional, and physical health? What disciplines do you have in place? What advice would you offer to other people in the field?
Advice, first of all, have a plan, because no matter who you are and what you do, burnout is 100% going to happen at some point. And now I'm a little bit of a crazy person. I love being very, very, very busy. And I love having a crazy packed workday where I'm constantly moving and triaging, and my attention shifts from literally 1 minute to the next to entirely different topics. But even I love that. That's always been something that I've been into, get burnout from it. And also, you might find this a little bit silly, but I am the most introverted extrovert you will ever meet. I love being with people. I love talking with people, but that does not give me energy. What gives me energy is actually complete silence and not talking. And that is very hard to do, especially in the day. So some of the strategies I've had for that, and certainly, with COVID and being a new mother, this has changed a little bit, but I find time to literally just be silent. So, before COVID, one of the things I used to do all the time was make sure that I had a solo vacation plan for myself. Typically go somewhere where I don't understand the language, they don't understand me. So I am just walking around having a great time, exploring and observing, but just in complete zen. And that's shifted a little bit since COVID and then having a baby, but still making sure that I've got time for myself. And that does involve a little bit more planning these days. So even if you have a family, talk to your partner, make sure that you have a good balance because they're likely going to need the same thing too. And I've been fortunate at Rhino that they've been very flexible with me as well. And especially in such a chaotic first year as being a mom, they've been very supportive of me. And, I've gotten some space when I've needed it. And it's been just tremendous.
That's so good. And I will just recommend, I heard this really cool guy named Tyler give a talk about mental health at some Simply CyberCon event. You might be able to find it on his YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to see my talk on that, check it out. But I do think it's a topic that we don't give enough attention to. I know for those of you trying to break into pen testing, it really does feel like a grind, and then you struggle with imposter syndrome as pen testers because you feel like everybody knows more than you do. But I'm curious, from the role of like a project manager and a director of operations, did you ever struggle, or do you ever struggle with imposter syndrome, thinking that you're not good enough,
Oh, yeah.
you're underqualified for the role? How do you battle that? How do you deal with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and yes. And one of the things that I really, again, love about working at Rhino is I can ask so many questions of anybody. And if I don't understand something technical that's being talked about, if I don't understand a certain process, I can just ask and I will get a very thorough response back. Actually, shout out to you. You did this yesterday for me. We were talking about a project and you gave me an ELI 5 on a technical term, a golden ticket, and I learned it. It was really fantastic. So, while I am certainly never going to be 100% expert in anything that I do, which is, something I'm a generalist, and that's something that kind of goes along with being a generalist, knowing a lot about a little, just finding ways around imposter syndrome because I'm never going to be the smartest person in the room. And I also don't want to be. I want to be around
That's good.
other people who are smarter than me because I can learn from them. And as long as you're listening, asking questions, following up, and digging into things, I really feel like you can grow. And also just a recognition too, especially in the tech world, when you look around the room, you might have imposter syndrome, but just about everybody else is in the same boat too. They're all thinking and feeling the same thing. And in security, there's so much that people need to know and can know and specialize in that, yeah, you're probably going to be in the room that somebody who knows something more than you. And that's a great opportunity just to talk to them, make a connection. And I can't say this enough, but ask questions.
That's so good. And going back to looking around the room, one unique aspect of your journey is you are a woman in leadership in a very much like a male dominated field. I just think about when we went back to DEF CON, you look around the room, it's almost entirely men. Now there are some women in there, but when it comes to women in tech, especially in leadership roles, I'm sure you've encountered challenges that I can't even begin to imagine. So what are some of those challenges you face and that you've had to overcome to be where you're at today?
Yeah, I will say that I am very fortunate and lucky enough that I personally have not faced in security many challenges, but I've worked with and I know a lot of women in security who have. Fortunately, Rhino has always looked at me as a first and foremost a human being, somebody capable and intelligent, and I have never ever once had a sense that being a woman was a blocker any type of way. But one of the things that I have noticed for security is a lot of, and even outside of security, a lot of women tend to be very timid. And now you don't need to be the loudest person in the room shouting at the top of your lungs, hey, pay attention to me. But you do need to make sure that, if you've got something valuable to say, and you do, say it. And make sure that if there are spaces you want to be in that you're not getting into, do it. If you want to be in the boardroom, take steps and make sure that you get yourself a seat at that table, whatever it is. And I find that a lot of times women they're lacking the confidence. It does have a bit of imposter syndrome, but I think natively at some point, a lot of us were trained that, we just need to hold ourselves back and we can't be the loudest in the room and, just wait to be called on and all of that. But if I have one piece of advice for the women out there, it's speak up, break some barriers. And if you're afraid to stand up and start shouting, which is totally legitimate, that is very scary. Start small, take baby steps, grow upon, and build upon what you want. And all you have to do is just try. And one of the things that I am always encouraging some of my mentees to do is just try. That's all that I ask. And that is how you get where you want to be.
That's good. And you mentioned mentees. You're the co-founder of an organization called Women in Leadership, which I think can be self-defined as helping women be in leadership and grow in their leadership, and mentoring is a big focus of that. So talk a little bit about the role of mentoring in your own journey, and what does, like, mentoring is a term thrown around often, but we don't actually define, like, what does mentoring actually look like. So do you mind just sharing with us a little bit about what that looks like in your journey and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So the Women in Leadership peer group that I put together, this was actually with somebody from the skydiving world, Betsy Hote Smith. Her and I, we met when I was 18. We were in a skydiving team together, a women's league. We had a four-way team called the Fireflies. We were not good, but it was an awful lot of fun. After I retired from skydiving, we lost touch, but we did meet up again out of just chance a couple years later at an MBA information session. We were both starting our programs around the similar time, checking things out, and we both recognized, we have a lot of questions and we have a lot of situations that we face that we don't have a sounding board for. And it would be really helpful to have a group of people who are not judging, but they all have a similar career goal in mind, which is just to keep leveling up, keep succeeding, keep growing. And what we ended up doing is curating a very specific small group of women who are about in the same boat as us, about the same level, so that we could have just a very confidential, open, warm space where we can ask hard questions. How did you deal with this situation? Oh, you want to raise and you don't know how to bring it up. Or somebody made you feel uncomfortable in the hallway. How do you tackle that? And it's been really successful. We've had it for a couple of years now, and it really is just an open forum for conversation. So that said, there are some women that I also mentor on the side more directly one-on-one. And there's two different types of mentoring. There's traditional coaching and mentoring. Now, I am not a coach. What coaches do is they work with you one-on-one to help you get to the answer that you're looking for. So meaning they will sit with you and ask a lot of probing questions and get you to find the answers on your journey. So me and, I have some folks in the audience who can attest to this. Me being me is I want my people to succeed so much that sometimes I take some shortcuts and I say, hey, listen, this is the problem that you're facing. This is what you should do. And then we talk through that. And, a lot of the times they take my advice, sometimes they don't, and that's totally fine, but they'll take a version of it. And I do go a little bit bigger and bolder to, again, encourage those people who aren't always speaking up and that might be a little bit more timid, just to take those baby steps. And it has been, I think, wildly successful, and it has been incredibly satisfying to me because, again, I love helping people succeed.
That's good. And if there's someone watching this saying, hey, I need a mentor, how do I get a mentor? I'm sure you've been asked that question. Like, how does someone even approach that? Do they spam people on LinkedIn? Like what does that look like? How does someone get a mentor, male or female?
Yeah, probably not spamming on LinkedIn unless you really do have somebody specific that you admire for a reason and you can get their attention and have a note or something that really gets their interest in working with you, because it is hard to take time out of the day. We all are very busy, but I would look for, if you're looking for somebody, look for somebody that you admire, that you look up to. Look for somebody who challenges you, because you don't want an echo chamber. You want somebody to push your buttons a little bit, try to push you and guide you in hopefully the right direction. But you want somebody that you can talk with, have an open conversation, feel comfortable about that, but trust that they're going to nudge you along. Now, I know that there are some formal groups for this. There's the Women in Cybersecurity group that has one-on-one peer mentoring. And there's a lot of other side groups as well. Just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's good. The only thing I would add, maybe from my perspective, to highlight the importance of mentoring, I have a good friend, really a mentor of mine named Tinas Green. So If anyone follows Try Hack Me, he's the creator of all the AD networks and things like that. I met him when I was live streaming his content, but we just kind of formed an informal friendship. Now we talk almost daily, but my job at Rhino is really due to him. So Tory, you know this, but when I interviewed at Rhino, I initially got the email that, hey, Tyler, you're not at the level we need you to be at for web app pen testing. Let's talk later on. And I was, I think, weeks away from taking the OSCP. So my initial reaction to that was, all right, fine. I'm not going to waste my time with this. Like, I need to take the OSCP. Like, I need to focus on this. And I told my friend Tina, it's like, hey, here's a response I received. And he said, the fact that they replied to you with that shows that they're probably a really good org. You should put the OSCP aside, because even if you fail that, like, being a pen tester is a goal. And so it was because of him that I even like came back at Rhino and said, okay, let me just like give it a shot, see if I can eventually land a role here. So mentorship is so important. You can't do this journey alone. Friendship is important. All terms we throw around, but don't consider the realities of them. And with all that being said, a lot of mentoring, friendship, coaching is helping get to where you want to be. Now, a lot of the people watching this want to break into the field of pen testing. It seems like this goal that is impossible to get to. At least it felt that way to me when I was trying to become a pen tester. So let's talk to that audience for just a little bit. You've been involved with numerous interviews with potential pen testers. You've seen resumes, you've done interviews, you've done all of that. Let's talk just real briefly about resumes. That's, of course, the first thing you see when someone applies for a pen tester role. What are some things on a resume that stand out to you that you would encourage people to put on their resume as they try to break into this field of pen testing?
Fantastic question. So what I am really looking for when I am reviewing a resume is seeing some actual tangible education, that you are really excited about pen testing. You live it, breathe it. You're constantly doing CTFs. You have certifications, and you don't necessarily need to have formal education. You know, we've had people that have just had a high school diploma that have been some of the best pen testers we've ever had. But it's really those certifications and the very strong demonstration of knowledge that was very evident that really makes those candidates stand out. Because, you know, there are a lot of people who are just starting out and it is hard to get your foot in the door. But if you can really demonstrate on that piece of paper just how much you're trying and you're actively developing your skills and you're hungry for it, then you're definitely in the right direction.
That's good. And when it comes to certifications, degrees, all that stuff, certifications is often a hot topic. Are there any certs that stand out to you, recognizing that you're not super technical, not probably in the world of Hack the Box? And well, you do Try Hack Me, like you've been working through Try Hack Me. But when you're reviewing a resume, are there any certifications that come to mind that you would encourage people to pursue because it helps you stand out in the field?
So good disclaimer right there, Tyler. So I am technically not technical myself. So I certainly can't speak to the quality of a lot of the certifications. But, you know, there's the standard big names. OSCP is always a phenomenal one to have. The Burp Suite certification is incredibly difficult and challenging. And that one is phenomenal. If you've got that on your resume, I want to talk to you.
I'm glad
But
you brought that up. Just
yeah.
a real quick on the Burp Suite one. That's one I don't think is talked about really much at all. I'm going off memory, so someone's gonna have to fact check me. I think it's only $100 to take that certification. You do need Burp Suite Pro, but you can get a free 30-day trial to Burp Suite Pro in order to take the exam. But if you want to be a web app pen tester, that is really a hidden gem. So I wasn't even thinking about that one. Sorry, you can keep going, but I wanted to just draw people's attention to that.
Yeah, no, that's a good add-on to it. And it is, again, incredibly challenging. So even the best of the best, sometimes you have to take multiple attempts, but there's a lot of good free training resources out there for it. But that one, although it's relatively new, is a certification, major standout.
That's good. Good to hear. And I'll even be curious, those of you in the chat, let me know your favorite certifications. We can start an argument in the different chat platforms, but be curious what you guys recommend to other people on the cert conversation. I know it can easily turn into different arguments, this versus that. I think the more important thing, and Tory, I'm guessing you'd agree with this, is whether or not that person shows a path of continual learning, whether it's certifications or CTFs yes. or CVEs, whatever it looks like. Are they going in the right direction? Are they continually developing and learning and seeking to improve themselves? Is that accurate?
Exactly. Constant growth, because we all know that the world of cybersecurity is not stationary. It is moving at lightning speed these days. So if you can't keep up with it, I mean, you're not going to be able to find the vulnerabilities that are out there. And you really do have to have that passion. And I know people throw that term around a lot, passion, but you really have to, just because it is so in depth. It has to be the thing that just makes your whole life.
Yeah, that is good. And when it comes to skills for pen testers, once again, we often talk about technical skills. Do you have the OICP? Do you have the PMPT? Do you have this list of certifications? Can you solve a machine and try hack me, hack the box? Can you pen test a machine? Can you do all this? But we don't talk about soft skills. And unfortunately, there is the stereotype that is too often true that when it comes to people who love computers, we spend so much time in front of a computer, we kind of suck at everything else, like talking and actually being in front of people, things like that. So speak for a little bit about what are some of the soft skills you look for when you're hiring a pen tester?
Yeah, so first of all, it's okay if you're not great at soft skills out of the box. What I'm looking for in that realm is that you're coachable, that you're trainable, that you are open to feedback. So,
That's
for
good.
example, if we're on a client call and um, you misstep asking the client a question, that you're open to feedback afterwards, that we can talk about that, and you're interested in how to do better next time. But some of the soft skills that I really find are so valuable from day one is communication. So I want to know what's going well for you. What do you have problems about? What's happening in your pen test where there's a blocker? And I do need you to be very clear. And I consider when we are talking internally a lot of like a call and response. So if you tell me that there's a problem, I'll ask you a question about it, and I expect a response to it. So I know how to triage and how I can move forward and help get rid of some of the blockers. So you don't have to be able to stand and give a presentation to 100 people. That's not what I'm talking about when it comes to communication, but just being very, very clear and direct, and just don't be afraid to talk to me, talk to the team. Um, Teamwork is another huge important soft skill at Rhino. So one of the major things that I see in the team that we have that is just so great, and some of the secret to our success is the teamwork. So we don't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Tyler, I don't see any of the pen testers trying to one up each other, or hold back information or knowledge because they want to be the best person in the room, or something like that. And I know that that is a problem at other organizations, not here. We're constantly working together to resolve problems, asking questions of each other and teaching each other cool new things. That is a huge, huge, huge thing that I see our team doing and encourage, because it is just, you can get farther together. And if you have a supportive environment, even better.
That's good. And you mentioned the importance of teamwork and what is probably not unique anymore about Rhino. Now, also correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only been at Rhino now just over a year. So I hit that 1 year mark, which is super exciting. But I know pre-COVID, almost all of Rhino was in the office every single day in Seattle. Now, much of the team is remote. Like I'm in South Dakota. It would be a very hard commute for me to get to Seattle. So how does remote affect that team dynamic? And how has Rhino kind of worked on still having that team dynamic with pen testers spread all across the United States?
Yeah, good question. So I was at Rhino just a couple months before COVID hit, and it was a huge change. Not because we all actually really love being remote, although we do still have an office that we can go to if you choose to. We don't force anybody to do that. But in the beginning, it was a little bit of trial and error, because it is kind of hard to keep that teamwork and that group culture from something completely remote. And so what you have to do is just create some remote culture, for lack of a better word, standards. So for example, we're a rather fun group. We have, certain emojis that we use for things. We have a lot of inside jokes, and, playing that up, starting every meeting with just a little bit of chit chat, ending the meeting with a little bit of chit chat helps people stay very connected and organically learn about each other's interests and other things, maybe outside of work, that they're working on. And to keep a group together like that, I have found the best success hasn't been doing scheduled lunch and learns, although, of course, those are valuable in a different type of way, or scheduled specific, like online parties, happy hours. Those get really cheesy and really old really fast, especially for our culture. But, when you have that open space, like pre and post meeting, to have just casual conversation, you find different interests with each other. And then organically, you find other ways of connecting outside of the actual 9 to 5. So for example, at Rhino, we have several folks that are very much into VR, and they do their own
Got my headset right
game
over there.
nights and
Heck
whatnot.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I couldn't manufacture that. I can't bottle that up. But if you are in leadership watching this and you're looking for some advice on how to have a good remote culture, you can try to manufacture it yourself, but you could also step back and look and see what the team is doing and what they're gravitating towards. What are they talking about casually, and try to lean into that. Let the group sort of guide what you're doing. Otherwise, you're forcing cheesy happy hours on everybody that they don't want to attend.
Yeah, that's so good. The only minor thing I would add is the importance of DEF CON, right? So like when I was hired at
Yes.
Rhino, it was like the only way I knew you guys was over a screen, which is cool. Like we've talked, but there's still like a piece that is missing of just like hanging out, having fun. DEF CON was huge for me to be able to like yo, Tory's a real person, Ben's a real person. All these people I see at stand up, like they have bodies, right? It's not just a head floating around. And that was huge, at least for
Yeah.
me, just to hang out and to actually like everyone at Rhino really is awesome. Like would love to hang out with any of
Yeah.
them anytime, and DEF CON proved that. So what we do is we go to DEF CON. That's kind of our in-person retreat. So I think it's big, although we're fully remote, having that at least occasionally. Would you agree with that? I'm guessing.
Oh, entirely. I will say you're taller in person than I was expecting. But yeah, no, in seriousness, it is really helpful to have that once a year in-person event, whether it's DEF CON or something else, because, there's a really good mix of getting to learn something cool with each other and getting to talk about all the exciting new things in the industry that's happening. And then also that casual downside to be able to hang out and just talk about who you are and get to know each other is a real human being. And we can get so trapped into our 9 to 5 that I feel like it's very important to know your colleagues. You don't have to be everybody's best friend, but it is really helpful to just know who each other are, be able to talk with them. And it does help with some of those things like imposter syndrome, communication, and teamwork, because you just feel just a little bit more comfortable having that interaction, being able to see somebody face to face. But that being said, we do enough Zooms internally that, we always have cameras on, for better for worse, that it does feel like we're very, very connected. But that in-person event is crucial.
Yeah, that's so good. And believe it or not, Tori, we've been on the stream for over 40 minutes. Like, time always flies. Isn't that crazy? Time always flies in this conversation. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about project management, because the reality is there's multiple ways to get into pen testing. To be in pen testing doesn't mean just what I do. It could be a project manager and helping with sales and clients and kind of being that blocker. So when it comes to project management, how do you get there? Someone's watching this and they recognize, I want to be in pen testing, but I don't want the highly technical role, but I still want to be around pen testing and help with client security. What's a good next step to pursue a project manager role?
Yeah, good question. So even though I'm not deeply technical, I will say that you do need to have some sort of a foundation or something that you're just starting with and building upon. So for example, when I started at Rhino, I got a crash course in a whole lot of IT ops and pen testing terminology, and I'm still getting that every day, which is great. But I've also had to do my own self-study to be able to communicate with clients and pen testers properly and know what is going on. So I do have my Security Plus. I found that has been very helpful. And I will say too that not having a traditional project management background is not a blocker to the position. So because at least in the consultancy world, you don't need to have PMP certification. You will have a process that you follow, but it's not nearly as strict and in depth is a lot of other organizations. It's not like you're doing a software build out and doing agile and all of that, but you do still need to be able to have just the basics and be able to be flexible, learn security along the way, and again, ask a lot of questions.
That's good. And one really practical resource, and maybe you can speak to this yourself. But when I was first getting into pen testing and IT, Try Hack Me was huge for me because it kind of guides you through some of those introductory topics. Try Hack Me is not paying me to advertise them. They should pay me. So Try Hack Me, if you guys want to send me a check, you know my address. You can send me the check. But you've been doing Try Hack Me. Have you found that helpful for your role as a project manager, helping with that technical skills?
Yes, and actually, I started Try Hack Me due to your encouragement. So thank you very much
Send
for
me that
that.
check, Try Hack Me. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous, again, being non-technical, jumping into a platform that I know is meant for technical people, but it was really easy, and it has been easy to start with some of their path programs that they put together to learn the basics, and you slowly grow. And it's education that works very well for me because I'm constantly moving and triaging and looking and switching gears all the time, that it's almost like a like a BuzzFeed version of a thick textbook. It's broken up into really nice, easy to understand chunks, practical, hands-on, and that has been really helpful as well.
That's good. And when it comes to project managers, what kind of blew me away because of my newbery to the field is I had a friend who got hired as a pen tester, and he sent me all these questions about like working with clients and doing sales, and like, hey Tyler, how do you do this at Rhino? And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Tory does it. I don't know how any of that stuff works. So for pen testers who get hired someplace who don't have a project manager, what would you encourage them to do? Like, are there any learning resources you'd recommend or steps that you have found helpful in your own journey that you would encourage them to do as they attempt to be their own project manager?
Yes. So first and foremost, ask in the interview process what that looks like, because if there is not a project manager, ask them about how that normally works, some of the blockers that you're seeing. And even if there is a project manager, ask about how the interaction usually is. How will you be working with this person? Because at least at Rhino, we work very closely together, not in a micromanagement type of way, but just so the blockers can be removed as soon as possible, so you can be hands-on keyboard doing exactly what you're looking for. But if you don't have that resource, I would strongly recommend, this is going to sound silly, but just be organized. I have not found a project management book per se that really fits well with pen testing exactly, because it's a little bit out of the traditional realm of project management. But make sure that you are taking detailed notes. Make sure that when you're following up with your client and stakeholders, that you follow up when you say you're going to. And when you have a problem, if there's credentials that aren't working or a URL that's not resolving, that you reach out right away and then track and monitor that communication so you can continually follow up, because otherwise half a day will go by. You've wasted 3 or 4 hours just waiting for an email. And, sometimes you can just pick up the phone and be like, hey, did you get my email? We're stuck here, need to be resolved. And so being your own advocate, and of course, being polite about it, and your client facing if you're your own project manager. It goes back to those communication soft skills. When you're interfacing with a client, you're trying to get them to do an action. So be nice, be very focused about what your ask is or the information that you're trying to get, and be succinct. So a lot of people are super busy. Nobody has time to read a very long email. If you're reaching out, especially if there's a blocker, keep it very short, keep it very brief, include screenshots, a POC if you can, anything to make it as easily digestible as possible, and make it super easy to get a quick response back.
That is excellent advice. And let's speak for those who have the benefit, like myself, of actually having a project manager. What are some do's and don'ts of working with a project manager? Like, what can a pen tester do to make your life easier and to just build a good relationship there?
Yeah. So when you need something, just being very clear and direct. Hey, Tori, I am stuck. These credentials don't work. I've tried resetting the password, and I need you to reach out to the client. So that message in itself, so helpful. You've got my name. I know that you need something. You've told me the problem. You've told me the steps you've taken to try to resolve it. And you told me what you need. Reach out to the client. Sometimes, occasionally, a pen tester will drop something and say, oh, this is going on. I'm seeing this sort of behavior. I'm not sure if it's expected. And that's totally okay. But it is sometimes confusing for me to know if it's just an internal note or if it's an action item. So then I need to follow up. But it is helpful to know specifically that you need my attention, what you need, what you've tried, and what the next steps are.
Okay, awesome. And for those of you, I know you guys are asking questions in the chat. I've kind of geared that into our questions. If I miss any questions throughout the conversation, let me know in the chat. I'll try to get to that before we wrap up. But we are going to wrap up in the next few minutes. So once again, for those of you in the chat, if you have a burning question you want answered, drop it in the chat, and I'll keep my eye over there and try to get to your question before we sign off. But let's talk a little bit about the actual pen testing process. There's a lot of things that were new to me as far as scope and how those things work, and like what types of assessments are done. So a few questions people often ask me when I'm live streaming, would love to get your perspective, is one, how long does an average pen test last? Like how many days is someone like me pen testing? What does that look like usually, general rule?
Ooh, so very tricky answer to that. There is no set standard, and certainly depends on your organization that you're working for. So it depends on really the scope. So if it's a web app that has a whole bunch of robust features, working on it for 2-3 days isn't going to do anything. That'll only give you the time to understand how the app functions. So typically, different projects take a minimum of a week, but I've seen them go as long as a month and a half. It just depends, or if you're doing a network pen test with thousands of IPs in scope, you certainly don't want to cut corners, but there is a balance though that sales does strike with the client to make sure that they're getting the results they're looking for, but also, budget is a real thing. So making sure to balance expectations, quality, and what they're expecting in terms of spend. So it can be flexible, and it really just depends.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hidden mystery. When the person I was talking about before who asked me those questions, that was one of the questions. Like, Tyler, how do you scope a pen test when you're speaking to a client? I'm like, I don't. They just like say, hey, Tyler, here's the pen test, here's the days. And so once again, showing the benefit of having a project manager and sales in that role. So like as a pen tester, you can focus on, the fun stuff, the pen testing side of things. But when it comes to assessments, is there a most common assessment that you often see, whether it's network, web apps, APIs? What's the most common one that you would encourage newbies, like, hey, you should brush up your skills on this specific area?
Oh yeah, web apps, 100% web apps. You should know the basics of web app pen testing like the back of your hand, OS Top 10. That is really the bread and butter of, I would take a leap here, any pen test firm, just because there's so many web applications out there and they all need to have very tight security. And that is the best thing, in my opinion, to learn first and really become proficient at.
That's so good. Okay, I want to highlight that for all of you potential pen testers watching. If you're like me, a lot of the resources are geared to like Active Directory, internal pen tests, which is awesome. We do those as pen testers, but the reality is web apps are huge, and that really like threw me off when I was applying for pen testing roles. I was like, yo, I know AD, I can do these internal pen tests, like red teaming type stuff. But then I was like a total noob when it came to like web apps and cross-site scripting and some of those basic things. And I've heard far too many people say, well, just web app isn't my thing. Well, you have to learn it. So whether it's a red team exercise, even an internal pen test, there's often web apps. That's often your way of getting a foothold in the network, is compromising a web app. That is the public facing resource. So just wanted to double emphasize that, because I know many of you, if you're like me, you've kind of brushed web apps to the side. Don't do that anymore. If you want to break into the field, one of the best ways to get in is web apps. Not the only way. I don't want to be the gatekeeper, but that is one of the best ways, is having strong web app skills when it comes to pen testing. Making sure I'm not missing any questions. The final question that I want to talk about, maybe I'll have two questions, we'll see. But one of the things that most pen testing companies do that they offer is talking to the client after everything's said and done, often with the pen tester, like walking through, hey, here's what was there, which is super intimidating to people. I know even on stream, people have asked me about like that whole process of walking a client through vulnerabilities on their network. Is it challenging? Do they push back? What does that look like? Do you have any advice to people who might be really nervous about talking to clients about technical concepts? What are some ways they can prep? What are some good things you've seen done?
Yeah, absolutely. So it does sort of depend a little bit on the format, if it's in person or virtual. Nowadays, I would say 90%, 99% of the debriefs have been on Zoom, which has actually been very helpful for people with nerves. So one of the things I would strongly recommend, if you're afraid to see an audience, change the view so you don't see everybody's little icon there. And sometimes, and this sounds very silly, I will personally change it to only see myself view, because then I'm talking to myself, and then it's a
That's really good.
conversation, and it's very comfortable, like talking in the mirror. But other things you can do to be prepared is read your report, review and refresh yourself of what you pen tested, refresh yourself with the scope and the specifics beforehand, because sometimes it'll be a couple weeks, maybe a couple months since you performed the pen test that you're doing the call, and you need to know what you did, what the results are, so you can field questions.
That is so good. All right, the last question. I'm just checking out the chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined. We've had consistently, like, between the different platforms, about 50 people live with us. So, guys, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. Tory, do you have just any closing words of wisdom for all of us on this journey of life, pen testing, cybersecurity? Very, very open area, but any
Yeah.
closing words of wisdom that you would recommend to all of us?
Yes, keep going, keep trying. Things can sometimes be hard. Sometimes you don't see a path forward, but it's there. You can do it. Just keep going.
Just keep going. Well, hey, Tory, thank you for
Yeah.
being here. For all of you watching, thank you for taking the time to watch. I will recommend two resources. Rhino Security Labs, we have our own Discord, and the purpose of that Discord is to help people break into the field and provide any answers to questions. So we even talked about when it comes to project management, which I get those questions occasionally, but I'm not a project manager, so I don't know how to answer those questions. For those of you who want to be a project manager, or maybe you're a pen tester without your own project manager and you just want a sounding board for some of those questions, feel free to ask them on Discord. If there is enough interest, we could even start our own project management channel, and we will do our best to answer those questions for you, of course, free of charge, just a way as a give back to the community. Tory's name in Discord, I think, is Tory-Rhino, maybe. If you
Yeah.
go to, okay, cool. If you go to the Rhino Security Labs Discord, in the most recent announcement, I believe I tagged her in it. So that's her Discord. Feel free to reach out to her. The other Discord that I helped found is the Work Smarter Discord, which is not connected with Rhino in any way. It's more my live streaming type stuff. But what I do there, actually, I have a team of people. Every Monday night, we host weekly goal meetings where we have people really from around the world sharing, hey, what did you accomplish this past week? What are your specific learning goals for this upcoming week? We took December off for the holidays, but it's either me or I have a team of people who lead those meetings. So if you're just looking for that mutual accountability, come join that Discord. Would love to meet you. Would love to be part of your journey. So thank you again, everyone. Tory, thank you again for being here, and I will catch you guys in the next one.
Thank you for having me.